For the American Center for Law and Justice, for the ACLJ, life has always been a top issue since our founding.
Barbara, I am here at this site because your office asked me to come here. You all wanted the dramatic effect. You got it. There are thousands of people and millions across America that disagree, that say abortion's murder. And the fact of the matter is, what this case is all about are people speaking out.
The two core issues for us at the American Center for Law and Justice, 100%, of course, number one, religious liberty. And the second issue, which I think is core to the ACLJ's mission and so important to us since our founding, is the fight for life, the fight for the unborn.
The ACLJ has always been at the forefront of fighting for life, whether that is defunding Planned Parenthood, which we have been successful in doing on numerous occasions, or supporting clinics that come alongside the mother and support the mother through the entire pregnancy and then even beyond.
When you talk about the defense of innocent preborn life, I really think this sits at the very center of everything that ACLJ does, and it's one of the things that inspires us and drives us forward.
It's a fundamental issue for the ACLJ. Either the unborn child is a human being or they're not. It's that simple. And of course, the science clearly establishes that that unborn child is a person.
If you can't agree on life and the right for everyone to have a chance to live, then everything else really doesn't matter.
This has been a very, very difficult issue, in part because the ACLJ has had to deal with progressives.
During the Trump administration, we had a lot of success on defunding Planned Parenthood.
It is my profound honor to be the first president in history to attend the March for Life.
Anything that the president could do through executive order was done. They reinstated the Mexico City policy so that U.S. taxpayer dollars were not going to foreign organizations that were funding abortion. But that's all been changed now.
The Biden administration has effectively ended the Mexico City policy.
And what the Mexico City policy did was to forbid American aid going to countries where they would use U.S. taxpayer dollars to perform abortions.
We all have to work really hard to ensure that no American taxpayer dollar ever goes to underwrite an abortion and to stop funding from going to abortions anywhere in the world.
This has been a key part of America's stance for life, for the value of human life, for morality itself. This is now, up for grabs and in question simply because of a change of administrations.
The Biden administration has appointed Xavier Becerra, a radical pro-abortion individual, to head the Health and Human Services Department.
So the HHS Secretary, former Attorney General of California, is also a congressman, Javier Becerra, is up to become the nominee. He is now the Secretary of Health and Human Services. And he gets asked about his vote on partial birth abortion.
I will tell you that when I come to these issues, I understand that we may not always agree on where to go, but I think we can find some common ground on these issues because everyone wants to make sure that if you have an opportunity, you're going to live a healthy life. And I will tell you that I hope to be able to work with you and others to reach that common ground on so many different issues.
I think for all of us, when it comes to partially delivering a child and then killing it, there's no common ground.
The HHS Secretary is the most pro-abortion HHS Secretary, Health and Human Services, in our nation's history. He tried to shut down and silence crisis pregnancy centers. He tried to make crisis pregnancy centers advertise where the abortions will be performed in the state of California, that you had to do that if you ran a crisis pregnancy center. Now, we beat him at the Supreme Court of the United States, but they're setting policy.
One of the most ardent pro-choice people in Washington, D.C., so when President Biden picked him to be the Secretary of HHS, we knew that these issues would be front and center.
We've seen that the Biden administration is completely sold out to the pro-abortion movement. We've seen that with ties to Planned Parenthood. We've seen that with funds funneling into abortion. We've seen that with appointments that President Biden has made.
I support a woman's right to choose. I support it's a constitutional right. I've supported it. I will continue to support it. And I will, in fact, move as president to see to that the Congress legislates that.
All of our pro-life work that we do at the ACLJ is more critical now than I've really ever known it to be.
It starts here at home with the United States government, holding them accountable, holding the Biden administration accountable so that all Americans are able to have faith in their government.
People think, well, if Republicans are in charge, then, it's the Republican Party platform is pro-life, so it would be easy to defund Planned Parenthood. But that's not really how Congress works. Not every Republican is as pro-life. When you have a pro-life president in office controlling the executive agencies, that's where you can really see some movement. And we saw that under President Trump, who said, let's look at all of my executive power and do everything we can.
Now, here's the good news. They are setting policy, and that gives us the opportunity to go to court to challenge those policies. And we have a conservative Supreme Court. Now, the great test on how conservative that court is about to happen. My hope and prayer is that it is. But again, we're not taking anything for granted. So in our briefing to the Supreme Court, we are really detailing the legal arguments on why life should be protected. The pro-abortion groups are unrelenting. They know they have a pro-choice administration. They know they've got a pro-abortion administration. They're going to go as far as they can, and we have to be there to stop it.
We are for life. Life is a precious gift of God. It is a precious gift of the Holy Spirit. It is something that we believe in very deeply and have for decades upon decades. We do not believe in abortion on demand. We do not believe in killing children.
If you look back at the whole history of the abortion movement, it is tied in with Margaret Sanger, who was very active in the 1920s and the 1930s.
I think the greatest sin in the world is bringing children into the world that have disease from their parents, that have no chance in the world to be a human being, practically. Delinquents, prisoners, all sorts of things just marked when they're born. That, to me, is the greatest sin.
And she wanted to shrink the population of the United States and perhaps of other Western countries, grounded in the perception that certain people are either unfit to live or they are unworthy of life. The ACLJ strongly believes that every life matters. And that means that we have been front and center in supporting the pro-life cause.
Life is under attack, and we have to protect the precious innocent lives that the Biden administration deems unworthy.
So there's two main issues too in the fight for life that we're working on right now at the ACLJ. One is we're seeing the refunding of Planned Parenthood. So Planned Parenthood was defunded to the extent that the Trump administration could do it. They did it. Now, was all of it defunded? No, but we're seeing a refunded Planned Parenthood now, a more powerful Planned Parenthood. When Planned Parenthood gets more money, they get more powerful. And when they get more powerful, Planned Parenthood gets stronger and more aggressive in court. When you have a radical HHS come in, an HHS secretary who's radically pro-abortion, and an administration full of pro-abortion advocates, what they try to do is whittle away at the conscience protections.
So I think you're going to see a lot of court action in the next several years. So in the last group, there was not that many because the administration was either fighting it or the House and Senate were controlled by a more pro-life majority. So legislation that was anti-life wasn't getting through. That's going to change.
We will continue to fight against these abortion initiatives. We will fight in terms of sending FOIA requests to the federal government. We will fight these initiatives in court, and hopefully we will prevail before the United States Supreme Court.
We're having to file more briefs now than ever before. We're in court now more than ever before. We've got a major appeal at the U.S. Court of Appeals from the Ninth Circuit defending those who spoke out for life that have been sued literally by Planned Parenthood and NARAL for simply exposing the fact that these groups were involved, and this was the allegations in the videos, in the sale of human body parts. And they really didn't deny it, they just said it was legal. We take a different view. But they went after the videographers, the reporters, the investigative journalists. That case is on appeal in the Ninth Circuit. It may well end up in the Supreme Court. The court will be the fight battleground.
Courts are a place of last resort. And when you talk about our work at the Supreme Court, it's the last court of those courts of last resort. So we want to be the advocates for people who they have exhausted every other possible remedy for their situation, and they still are seeking justice and we want to be their warriors for justice, if you will, and fight alongside them.
The United States is one of only 7 countries in the world that does not restrict abortion at any stage of the pregnancy. That is a list that you do not want to be on, and there's a way that we can get ourselves off it. We at the ACLJ have been advocating for a piece of legislation that is called the Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection Act. It's a very simple bill. It simply says at the stage of pregnancy, it's right about 20 weeks, where a child is scientifically proven to be able to feel pain, we will not allow an abortion after that stage. It's a very common sense piece of legislation. It catches us up to where the rest of the world is. That is a piece of legislation that is being blocked by the House of Representatives right now, specifically Nancy Pelosi. If 218 members of the United States House would go down to the floor and sign what's called a discharge petition, that bill could be passed out of the House and move on to the United States Senate. It's something that should absolutely happen.
It's very important that we remain hopeful that the courts that the Trump administration was able to impact will give us good rulings that are based in law and sound reasoning and not just liberal rhetoric.
I truly believe that when you're fighting for life, when you're fighting for the life of the unborn, you're on the right side of history, you're on the right side of law. You're fighting for what's right, you're fighting for what's just, you're fighting to protect human life.
There's no way to quantify how many people are alive today because of the work of the American Center for Law and Justice just on this issue alone.
When you have an administration that stands against the things that you believe, they're at the very core of who you are. We each have a unique responsibility to be the loyal opposition, to work desperately hard to redouble our efforts to make sure that the things that we care about, the policies that we propose, and protecting the unborn, protecting every life from conception to natural death becomes even more urgent, and the work that the ACLJ does becomes more important now than it could ever have been in an administration that was more favorable to its policy preferences.
I will tell you this, this is an area where we've seen tremendous progress, and we've been helped on a lot of areas. In the courts, we've been very successful. The media has put a spotlight on this, and conservative media especially has brought this to kind of the forefront.
Startling revelations tonight that could put some in the abortion industry in a most uncomfortable position. It has to do with what happens after that procedure.
There is a legal side of this. Harvesting organs, fetal tissue like this, is illegal.
And then you went from the kind of the protest movements of the 1980s and 90s, where you had a lot of protests against abortion, which were important to raise the issue, to the technology increase within the medical community. I'll never forget, my brother-in-law, who's a radiologist, said the technology will get so good, the imaging will be so great, that when you see the child at 8 weeks, 10 weeks, whatever it might be, there's going to be no debate that this is a human being, this is a person. And that is absolutely correct. So for us, fighting for life is a top priority, and I believe it's one we're winning successfully.